President Cyril Ramaphosa will tomorrow lead the handing over of land and title deeds to farmers at Tafelkop in Groblersdal in Elias Motsoaledi Local Municipality under the Sekhukhune District Municipality. Limpopo Province, the farmers have been successfully farming various agricultural produce for around 25 years on this land, and the Department of Public Works of course, is also assisting in that particular project as well as rural development. And to discuss the story further, I'm now joined by Toko Didiza, who's the Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform, as well as Rural Development. Minister, good evening, and thank you so much for your time tonight.
Good evening to you and your listeners.
Thank you. Let's then begin with this project. Certainly an undertaking that government is then making to assist those farmers in Tafelkop. Talk to us then about how it's all to unfold.
Let me just say that this is part of the commitment by government to release state land to actually those who are historically disadvantaged. In this case, this land belonged to government and farmers were actually working on it and farming without any form of tenure security. So what government had done after having been approached by farmers was to actually release that land in full title to individual farmers who are 31 in total. The sizes of land are not of the same size. Some of them it's 7 hectares, others is 5 hectares, depending on the farming operations that farmers are engaged in.
And how much security then does this give to these particular farmers that are then allocated this particular, these pieces of land?
Actually, as from tomorrow, these farms will now belong to the individual farmers in their name and rights in full title, which means they now have freehold titles in their name, which they can use to access funding for their operations, but also they can bequeath the properties that they have to the generations to come.
And one could then obviously look at this particular process and then ask a question as to how were then these farmers, then selected for them to then be able to receive these title deeds tomorrow?
These farmers were actually farmers who were allocated this land in the irrigation scheme by the then Kangwane government. And when the democratic state took over in 1994, allowed those farmers to actually continue, because indeed it was in our interest that those farmers must continue to produce without them being impacted upon negatively. So what is happening now is that those farmers can have full title on the land that they've been working. Some of them are already exporting some of their fresh produce. Some of them are actually selling in the local and regional markets where they are able to have buyers.
And Minister, government had previously said that, as part of its process, it is going to almost lean towards being biased towards females as well as young people and the disabled. But in this particular case, I see then that of the 31 title deeds that are to be handed over, only one is female. Is there a particular reason for this?
There's actually not one who is female, because there's one gentleman who has got 2 wives and actually has allocated both the wives the pieces of land that they were working on. But let me just indicate, these are legacy projects where already there were these farmers allocated in whatever criteria that the then government had chosen. So you couldn't actually deny them the right to continue to farm when they've been farming for 25 years.
And there's also been criticism, in the past and looking at over the years how this process was unfolding, that small size farms, are broken up into smaller units, and this makes these farms sometimes not become as profitable as they ought to be. How then is government looking into this particular issue to make sure that these farms are economically viable as much as possible?
Actually, these farmers we're talking about are people who have been farming for 25 years, and they've been making profits in the 25 years. They've been farming in irrigated land, and they've actually been producing with high-value crops. Some of them are in tobacco, for instance, and they're selling their products to British Tobacco. And I think it's important for us as South Africans to appreciate that farming does not only mean you can be commercially viable if you farm in large-scale land. It depends on the ecosystem where you're farming, the climate conditions, as well as your soil types, and how intensive you may be farming in that different pieces of land. So smallholder farming has a place in South Africa, and it can be commercially viable, so as commercial farming can be able to farm productively and commercially.
And how much then of an extension is government going to make towards that particular community in future to ensure that even those that are not part of, the farming community can then be assisted in order to be able to then get into farming? Because also what we have seen in the past is that some of those who are then given the land may not necessarily be able to work it. But in this case, you're giving it to people who've been, working the land. But what happens then with those that are then wanting to be part of this and are going to be looking on tomorrow?
You recall that when President announced the release of state land for agricultural purposes in his 2020 State of the Nation address, he said one of the things we will do as government is to ensure that those farmers will be assessed the level of capacity and capability that they have. We will train them. We would also ensure that we support them to be able to farm, initial capital for them and infrastructure to be able to have those farms farmable. So it's not like government will just give people the land and then walk away. That is why we're even reviewing the land that we've restituted as well as the land that we've given to farmers as part of redistribution program to see how best we can support them to be commercially viable and be productive so that they can contribute to food security in our country.
And when you then look at the issue of the administration of state land, the department has in fact said that this has been a challenge in the past. Are you finding that things are improving?
We are on the road of improving, but there is a lot that we have to do still to make sure that land administration system is actually efficient.
And is corruption then still a factor there when it comes to issues of the administration of state land?
Those are some of the issues that we're dealing with currently, and those that have been found on the wrong side of the law will actually be dealt with accordingly.
All right. Minister, thank you so much for your time tonight. Certainly, we do appreciate the update as we look to tomorrow then to see how this particular project is then going to unfold. That's Togo Didiza there, who's the Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform, as well as Rural Development, who was discussing with us the expected handover of land and title deeds to farmers near Groblersdal in Limpopo.